Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Jamie Aaron, and today we're going to talk about practicing the guitar. One of the most common questions I get from students is how to practice. A lot of times we feel a lack of motivation, or what you're doing just doesn't work. You're not seeing advancement in your guitar playing. Today I'm going to show you my ideal practice routine, as well as a way that you can get the most out of your own practice routine if you only have a limited bit of time to practice. So I'll start this video by quoting my former teacher and mentor, Bruce Foreman, amazing guitar player. I remember once he told me the hardest thing about playing guitar is taking the guitar out of the case. And this is true. A lot of times there's so many distractions, so much going on, that it's hard to just get the guitar out of the case and in your hands. And if you've ever experienced this, you've noticed that once you get the guitar in your hands and you start playing, it's hard to put it down, but it's just that first step of getting started and getting into your practice seat and getting going. That's the hardest. So there are a couple things that I really recommend. First off, when it comes to practicing the guitar, you have to enjoy the process. We all want to be amazing guitar players. We all want to get to the highest level. We all want to be able to play songs and play, music with our friends and gig and record. But you really have to enjoy the process of practicing. I like to think that when I'm practicing, I'm on a treasure hunt and I'm looking for that treasure. And that treasure are the things that I find when I practice that help me get better. And when I get better, that's like finding treasure. Another thing is you're always going to have the opportunity to get better. Nobody ever says, okay, I mastered the guitar, I'm done. There's always going to be something new to practice. So one thing that's very important is creating a good environment for practicing. So for me, I like to get rid of distractions, make sure your phone's nowhere near. I like to have some coffee and water nearby just to help fuel my energy and my practicing. And I like to have a music stand in front of me. And if I have music on my music stand or things that I'm interested in learning, I'm kind of drawn to it. And that inspires me to practice more because I see it sitting there looking at me saying, Jamie, come practice us, come practice us. So that helps. So you really want to create a nice, clean room, a nice environment that'll really inspire you to practice. And I love practicing in the morning with my cup of coffee. The earlier in the day you can get it done, then you can enjoy the rest of the day and know you got some of that practicing done. So first off, let me talk about my ideal practice routine. If I had a full day and I can practice the entire day, here's how I split up my practice routine. The first thing I do is I sight read. Nobody likes to sight read. Sight reading is not fun, especially for guitar players. So if I do it first thing, I know I can get it out of the way and be done with it for the rest of the day. So sight reading as a guitar player, it doesn't come up that often, but I like to practice sight reading. So if I'm ever in the situation at a recording session, at a gig, or an audition where music is put in front of me that I've never seen before, I feel comfortable reading it. And it just makes things efficient. If I get a chart, I don't need to spend time really going over it. I can just sight read through it. So I get that out of the way first. And the way I sight read is I have lots of sight reading materials that I've collected over the years, a lot of sight reading books, just different lead sheets, classical etudes, and I'll just pick out a few things and spend maybe 20 minutes or a half an hour reading if I have the luxury of time. And if you'd like to know more about my approach to sight reading, I did a full masterclass on pickup music for sight reading on guitar. There's a sample of it on YouTube, a good chunk of the masterclass you can watch right now. I'm linking that below, as well as a link how to join pickup music if you're interested in watching the full-length masterclass, which has a bunch of reading examples and tips on how to become a better reader. So once I get my reading out of the way, then I move on to physical exercises. These are physical exercises. Pretty much I'm taking my fingers to the gym. And these might be scales, arpeggios, etudes, basically anything that's going to strengthen my fingers. And for all these, as well as the sight reading, I use my trusty metronome. Yes, this is an old digital Korg metronome from the mid-2000s. Probably got it on your phone. I use that one too, but I've had this one since college. I love it. It's my trusty old metronome. So I practice with the metronome. I start super slow and I increase the speed that I practice with, but I always want to start slow. First, as a way to build up my chops, so I don't want to start playing fast, but also to really focus on getting perfect sound. This concept really was made clear to me probably about 12 years ago back at the Blue Whale Jazz Club in LA. I remember I went to a jam session and there's this amazing guitar player, Charles Oltura, playing. And he plays some of the fastest guitar I've ever heard, but just completely clean, pristine, up in the high register. And I remember asking him, I was just a grad student at the time, went up to him on a break, and I said, how on earth do you play with such precision so quickly with just perfect right hand, perfect left hand technique? He said I practice and warm up as slowly as possible. And I've since taken lessons from other teachers that have told me the same thing, that you really want to practice getting the notes as perfect as possible. Good, nice, big sound for every note. And then you gradually increase your metronome to where you're playing faster. That way, when you get to the faster speed, you really have the precision thing down, and you don't have all the ha in your playing. As guitar players, we all want to play fast. It's something that's sort of hardwired, that fast equals impressive. People like to play fast. And if you want to get there, I highly recommend starting slow as possible. So on a typical day, I might put my metronome to 60 beats per minute and just play quarter notes at 60, and then eighth notes, and then 16th notes. And I'm doing this with major scales. I usually will take the major scales and play them through all 12 keys in the circle of fourths. Sometimes I take chromatic scales or other little exercises, things like that. And I actually did a video on some pinky strengthening exercises, some good fingering exercises that are good to build up finger strength. I'll link that below. This was one of my earliest YouTube videos, but you might find it really useful. So I'll do stuff that really works on my time because I'm using my metronome, but also helps with my chops. And I'll probably do that for about a half an hour, sometimes more if I'm feeling it. But scales, arpeggios, all with the metronome, starting slow and gradually ramping that metronome up to faster speed, which is warming me up before I get to that faster speed, in addition to really just focusing on my time and playing with a metronome. So from there, I'm going to focus on chords and some sort of thing that will help me get better with chord playing. Maybe it's playing rhythm exercises, funk rhythms with a metronome. Sometimes it's playing chord scales, things like this, in all 12 keys on different string sets. Sometimes it's just learning new chord voicings or working out of a chord book, like a Ted Green book or Mitch Chamara's book, which has been pretty influential to me, Experiential Contrary Motion for Guitar, which has some great ideas. So I'll work on things that really enhance my chord playing as well. From there, I focus on more melodic ideas. And so I'll move on to playing lines, and maybe I'll transcribe a solo, or maybe I'll work out of a book that has some sort of melodic ideas. Transcribing is great. I did a video on transcribing. I'll link that one below. I'm talking about the importance of transcribing and how I like to transcribe solos to get melodic ideas. And I'll use this time to also work on learning tunes. So that's kind of the next phase. I work on lines, but sometimes I'll use that within the framework of a tune. So maybe there's a new jazz standard that I want to learn. I'll learn the tune. I'll listen to different versions. I'll transcribe different phrases. Maybe not the entire solo, but I'll transcribe different phrases over those chord changes. So I spend a lot of time learning songs and learning phrases or lines from other people's solos. So as my practice routine moves on, I get more creative, right? We start with just sight reading and physical kind of things, scales, working on chords, and then I work on implementing those kind of things into songs. So maybe I'm practicing improvising over a certain set of chord changes. I use a looper a lot in my practice routine because I like to play along with chord changes. So maybe I'm working on ideas with the diminished scale. So I'll put a set of chord changes or a static vamp, and then I can practice that with the sound of the chord underneath, so I can really hear how my lines reflect the chord and how they go with the chord. So transcribing, listening to other artists, that's also very important. Then I move on to even more creative. Maybe I want to write, maybe I work on writing or producing a beat. So I'm really expanding my creative palette here, moving on from just the pure physical exercises. And then from there, sometimes you just got to play for fun, right? It's called playing music. And what's the point if it's just going to be all the practicing, which yes, can be fun and can be enjoyable, but sometimes you just got to jam. And my favorite thing to do is to put on a recording or a YouTube video, get my pedal board out, crank my amp loud, and just play. Then I'm implementing a lot of the ideas that I've learned, and I'm also just having fun and playing the stuff that I already know. You don't want to spend all day playing the stuff you already know because you're not going to get any better than that without doing that other stuff first. But I like to make time every day just to play guitar for fun. Okay, so what I've described is like a 4 or 5 hour plus day of practicing. And some days that's great, but I don't have the time like I used to. When I was in college or grad school or just starting out in my career, I had a lot of time to practice and I loved doing it. But now I have a son, I have gigs, I have teaching, I have all kinds of stuff going on. So here's how I recommend practicing when you don't have the luxury of time. you can just spend a little bit of time on each of those things. And when it comes to sight reading or warming up, I have a lot of students that I teach, especially at the college I teach at. I said, did you work on sight reading? No, I didn't have time. Well, what I recommend is 5 minutes a day of sight reading or 5 minutes a day of warming up. Everybody can find 5 minutes in a day. Like I said, the hardest thing is just to get that guitar out of the case and into your hands. And if you practice for 5 minutes a day on your sight reading or warming up 5 minutes a day, or maybe 5 minutes a day is all you have to play guitar, that's fine. If you do it exponentially, that's why I'm moving my finger up, exponentially you're going to get a lot better than if you spend 3 hours one day, get burnt out, and then don't touch the guitar again for another month when you have 3 hours again to devote to it. So if you can fit little pockets of time every day, that'll really help. So if I have a limited amount of time to practice, then what I'm going to do is my warm-up routine might last 5 minutes. I might just pare it down and just do 5 minutes of warming up or 5 minutes of sight reading. Some days I have even less time than that, and maybe I wake up in the morning and I really want to learn this solo, and that's all I have. If I have an hour and I really want to say transcribe that Wes Montgomery solo, or I really want to learn the guitar part to that Chaka Khan tune or whatever it may be, then that's what I'm going to do. Because sometimes you just got to listen to your heart and to what's going to make you play and what you're passionate about that day. So some days I might forget all the warming up and the sight reading for that day, and I might just jump into what I'm most passionate about and most excited about that day. Because the point really is you want to have that guitar in your hands as much as possible. So maybe one day it's going to be learning that song or doing a solo guitar arrangement or working on this new chord concept from a YouTube video or a master class. And that's what's going to get me going that day. Then I'm going to listen to that voice, and that's what I'm going to do that day. So it's all about trying to get as much in as you can, but really follow what you're passionate about that day. So another tip, if you have limited time and you really just can't fit much practicing in, there are things you can do to practice when you're not around a guitar. The most important thing is listening to music. You can learn so much just by listening, especially if you're starting to study jazz or funk or blues, any music that has its own specific vocabulary. If you listen in the car, while you're cooking, while you're brushing your teeth, a lot of those ideas and the sound and the vibe and the pocket will work their way into your ears, into your head, and you'll find those ideas coming out on the guitar. I can't tell you how many things have come out in my playing, in my solos, whether it's just kind of a swing feel or maybe even certain melodic phrases or ideas that I really haven't spent any specific time working on or literally sat down and transcribed, but they come through because I've listened to them so much on recordings that they just work their way. The ear is a magical thing. A lot of what you can do is just listen. Obviously, you're not going to just magically be able to play guitar by listening, but the more you listen to the type of music and the types of players that you want to play like, it'll come out in your playing, whether it's the feel, the groove, the sound, or the ideas. So many ideas just come out from listening to that kind of sound. So do as much listening as you can when you're not around the guitar. You can also do some exercises. If you just do this, it can really help strengthen the fingers. And say you're sitting in a waiting room at the doctor's office or sitting in traffic, you can think about the guitar and think about those fingerings, and it'll actually really help. So there are ways that you can kind of mentally practice as well. So at the end of the day, what's important is that you're playing guitar, you're improving on the guitar, and you're having fun playing. And if you're doing all these things, you're definitely going to get better. I hope this video was helpful. Please click subscribe and follow. I post lesson videos, performances, as well as gear demos. You don't want to miss the next video. I hope you can take some of these tips and work them into your own practice routine.